Episode: Examples of Tech Areas to Review. Raw Technical and Development Plan Review Checklists. Let's talk about a raw technical and development plan review checklist. This episode is an ever deeper detail tech episode and is a complement to the earlier technical and development plan review episodes. Examples of technical areas to review might include proofs in software in lieu of technical design documents only if the proofs are product shippable and long-term code quality. In other words, you don't need to write a tech design document or do any briefs if the software can be proven already or has already been proven. Prototypes are not substitutions, though, for production-ready code, though they are important to pre-production to prove ideas and capability. Tech design documents, if not implemented with estimates, dependencies, risks and mitigations, and measures for success, need otherwise to have some kind of proof. Assets and code budgets, profiling, instrumentation, and reporting visualization should be reviewed. Workflows, data pipelines, profiling, and optimization planning should all be proven or time scheduled to deliver them and their proofs early in either pre or production. You might review technical art review areas. We'll talk about more detail on that later. You should review original, licensed, purchased technologies and tools and make sure they're approved by your company and organization and its legal and corporate affairs, as well as any technical leadership. You should review version control, tracking, branching, mainline integrations for code, tools, geo, as in geometry, textures, animation, lighting, tags, audio, video, etc. You should review configuration and build management. That might include automated build pipelines, distributed builds, daily, nightly builds, weekly builds, caching and backups, media layout, and so on. You should review software design and architecture. Might include code, pipeline, modular interfaces, containments, dependencies, concurrency, and so on. You should review directory file folder layouts and naming conventions. Things like the core game, tools, shared libraries, art assets, plugins, content, everything. There should be a standard layout and naming convention for all things. You should review code quality. You should have guidelines for code quality. You should review your code for quality. You should have verification tools to ensure only the right functions and tools are being used. There's a lot of code quality verification tools available. You should review functional testing. You should try to incorporate unit testing, limit testing, test plans, regression and verification processes for further quality testing. You should have open for testing roadmaps and a bug database and related tools to ensure you're successful and able to communicate with all teams and test. You should review profiling, telemetry, and analytics. That might include CPUs, GPUs, bus management, debugging tools, instrumented and automated collection, automated drift analysis, and so forth. You should review automation in general for things like builds and their pipelines, load and functional testing, user interface crawlers, and visual captures. Again, telemetry, all automated. You should review data conditioning, its authoring, its iteration, its interim formats, its previews, its tuning tools, including real-time hot swappable, loadable capabilities, if at all possible, in real software. You should review script engines and expose native and script functions and data between script and native codes. You should review network and server topology, cloud design and topology. You should review interfaces and installation models for back-end replacements and patch updates and versioning for those. Again, in development as well as retail environments. You should review network traffic requirements and emulation to define and validate unique users and bandwidth and latency targets. You should review network technology Areas like client, server, cloud, their protocols, packet latency, loss, variability, compensation, what databases may or may not be used, what is deterministic and not, what is server versus client arbitrated, what state synchronicity or tools exist. You should review database technology, the schemas, versioning, and segmentation, again, in client as well as online. You should review object management, communication, and partitioning. It might include things like levels, layout, characters, gear, pickups, actors, etc. You should review rendering scenes, objects, inter-object connections, socketed rendering objects. You should include display lists, buffering, shaders, particles, shadows and lighting, full screen and post effects, and so much more. You should review scene graphing, streaming, and management. You should review physics, rigid body, inverse kinematic, a la ragdoll, etc. You should review animation, blending, and state management, and product logic that's tied to animation. You should review font systems. You should review localization, database, and multi-byte Unicode capabilities. You should review dynamic content, published and user-generated as well. It should include posting, propagation, discovery, cataloging, even consumer voting, rating, downloading, and banning. You should review input and controls, including how gamepad controllers, mice, peripherals, keyboards, whatever, trackpads, touchscreens, everything. How does that work? And how does a remote or multiplayer interface work for those inputs? And how does lag or latency get compensated for? Is there dead reckoning to compensate for any server or remote changes in what has actually happened to the consumer? You should review replay systems. They may include input and event, timestamp recording and playback, determinism versus state management, etc. You should review saved games, user interface, and technology-related features. You should review certification and compliance, technical checklist requirements, etc. You should review age ratings, things like ESRB, PEGI, USK, and more. They should all have an approval plan. You should review user interface, front-end tech and integration, including the back-end and script tie-ins. You should review file system, compression, concatenation, and group data, including concurrent file open and access. You should review downloadable content and unlocks, single DLCs and multi-DLC concurrent use support. You should review server-driven content in static shipped games as well as dynamic games, including data replacement, incremental data, and selection choice changes. You should review the memory system, allocator models, and tracking and debugging. You should review audio systems, sound, music, speech, static, and dynamic stitched, analysis, lip sync, including localization support, and even if there is MIDI or otherwise synthesized audio. You should review video systems. That might include playback, decoding, encoding, their codecs, including again, localization and subtitle support. And potentially audio voice dubbed language audio track selection. You should review art tools and their plugins. You should review preview tools and runtime hot swappable asset loading for audio, art levels, anything. You should review art data pipelines, audio data pipelines, and their distributed asset builds. You should review workflow analysis and optimization. You should review prior version postmortems and any learning for integration, refactoring, and mainline integration as appropriate. And once more, you've made it through a very deep dive episode. Well, that concludes the raw deep dive checklist. I hope there were some nuggets of value for you. Coming up, Service and Analytics Deep Dive.